For me, I remember when I originally listened to you or read about your post around trust and psychological safety, I remember thinking, well, in order for psychological safety to exist, there has to be, I mean, it comes down to individuals, it comes down to people, right? And so people have to be able to give trust, and psychological safety is a byproduct in some ways of that, as opposed to, sort of focusing and say, oh, we're going to create this pillar. It's like, yes, we will create this pillar, but the fundamental principle of that is still trust. So that's kind of my initial reaction to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's a crux. It is, because how do you accomplish both things if one is from the inside and one is from the outside? And really, you only have control over one, the trust part of it, right? But say you're at work and you're in a place where you don't have psychological safety and you cannot trust the people that you're around, no matter how hard you try, because they haven't offered you any psychological, like maybe when you got there, you didn't get your inclusion safety. So everybody made you feel like, like you weren't included, and you sat for 2 weeks at your desk and nobody asked you to lunch or anything like that. Well, right off the bat, you're not going to, your trust is going to be less, right? So people are going to come up to you after that length of time, and you might question why they're there, and why they hadn't come talk to you initially. So then we go back to the psychological safety. It has to start with that. Right?
But within that, yeah, I mean, absolutely yes. But I guess I'm also trying to think that, from the flip side of that, the person who didn't come up and say hi, like, is that because that person didn't trust that they could give their trust to someone new? They didn't know how to break that. And so it still fundamentally comes down to that core, at that individual level, that, like, me being the person who was welcoming a new person there, I have to trust that I can talk to a new person as well. And then by doing that, we're building a bridge of psychological safety.
That's very true. So psychological safety and trust is building relationships, really. And a relationship sometimes causes people anxiety. New relationships cause people anxiety, right? So like you just mentioned, maybe the person hasn't come up and had a conversation yet, or that, because they also don't trust, right? So that is a very, very good point, because this is relationship building.
And so within that, one of the big questions that comes to mind for me now following this discussion is this idea of who's responsible then for building this type of trust. Because I know that often I sort of see that by being able to put a structure and a label around some things, there can be an effect where it's like, oh, well, someone's responsible for building, say, that first stage or the second stage of trust. But who is responsible for that? Is it always at the individual? Is it a leader? Like, who gets that ball rolling?
Well, I think it has to be the organization. I think it has to be something that a psychological safety has to be something that is in a mission and vision statement, and that is from the very from day one. So when you're reading as an applicant to a job, when you're reading their website, when you're reading their job requirements and things, you're already getting a good indication of whether you can trust this company or not, just by the words they say or whatever, right? So if in even just your presentation to applicants, you're beginning to teach them that they have psychological safety in your workplace before they've even ever stepped into it. And that's verbiage, words you use, things that make people feel better. That could be the start. That could be the start right there. The person then has to go in and trust, even if they've had a really bad job before, that this job won't be the bad job. So maybe it is that it's both. Maybe it's both. It is a little bit of both here, Scott. So as people ourselves taking on responsibility, how do I say this without, like, let me think about how to say this for a minute. So often we just run off and we get jobs because we need a job, and we don't really look at the job. We don't check things out. We don't vet them, right? Because we just need to get a paycheck. But if we trusted ourselves enough we would go out and vet, and we would get the jobs that we actually want in the companies that we feel like their culture will fit us based off the verbiage they're saying, their website, in reviews, whatever, right? And so then we have to trust ourselves. So now we're going to walk into the workplace with this sense of trust. That's our personal responsibility. And we're going to expect that that employer is going to come through with all the things they've told us that they would.